Recording in progress.
Multiverse of Marvel. 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 Multiverse of Marvel.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Multiverse of Marvel podcast, where each week or whenever decide to record, our resident Marvel guys, Aaron and Dan Grindlay, will dive into a crazy corner of the ever-expanding Marvel multiverse, which looks like it will be expanding this year with Doctor Strange, but we will get into that later. But because right now, this week, we'll be talking about Moon Knight. Because as I'm sure most people know, there's the Disney Plus show coming up. It's what
End of the month, I think.
yeah, it's March 30th, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Let me just think.
Actually, I don't think it would look like the 30th. I think it's a 20 something.
Yeah,
No, you're right. 30th. I think it's the 30th.
Yeah, so yeah, it's March 30th, and it's going to be 6 episodes. And I was checking on IMDb; they only had the first episode listed, and they don't have a length on it yet. So I'm guessing it's probably probably 30 to 60 minutes, probably judging by the last few shows that came out. And last we talked, what were we talking about? One of the shows last? I can't
Was it
remember.
Loki?
Yeah, so Loki. Yeah, so what came out after Loki? Last year it was
We've had
Hawkeye.
Shang-Chi, we've had Hawkeye, and we've had Eternals.
I haven't finished Hawkeye, but I watched Shang-Chi.
yeah,
I can't get excited about Eternals, but
yeah.
I can't ever get excited about Eternals. The only Eternals series I have, I bought out of obligation because I love Miracle Man and wanted Neil Gaiman to be able to do more, and was happy with the idea that Marvel would make it accessible to the masses.
And did
So
it
that
work?
paid off.
That's good. But yeah, I don't know anything about the Eternals, and I saw it in the theater when the theaters were open last year, and it was okay.
All you really need to know about the Eternals is it's one of those comics that only really works when the right person's behind it, And when Jack Kirby created it, it worked because it was Jack Kirby, right? And then other people took it and just it didn't work right.
Yeah.
And Neil Gaiman, the miniseries Aaron was mentioning there, he seems to have a pretty good idea of it. But I mean, he's Neil Gaiman. The guy can write
Well,
pretty much.
Yeah.
anything.
I've read long ago, like the first Eternals that I ever came across was remember that Christmas ages ago when Becky was like, "Hey, Aaron, my landlord was like, hey, we found these comics.
Mhm.
You know anything about them? Here's a milk crate full of comics." Hell yeah, this is just Becky. This is the best Christmas gift anybody has ever given.
Yeah.
And it's
No.
just my stepsister, just like, I found these. They mean nothing to me. But the Thor run that had the Eternals was in that, and it was fine enough. It wasn't a Thor run that I felt necessary to collect and keep, but I've read after reading that story that that was kind of the misstep. Like that's where they started bringing the Eternals into the Marvel universe, and that prior to that.
They weren't MC or Marvel Universe before that.
Yeah, like
There was
Jack
kind of
Kirby
their own
came
thing
in.
before.
Yeah.
Well, when Jack Kirby returned to Marvel after having turned traitor to DC for years.
doing like the fourth world over at DC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. After he finished with all that, he returned to Marvel, and Marvel was like, "Well, maybe we'll get some fourth world stuff out of this. Do whatever you want." And that's where we got. He did Eternals, he did Moon Knight and Devil Dinosaur under the title
Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur.
Moon Boy, yeah, subject heading, yeah, whatever. And 2001 is Space Odyssey, which is where we got Aaron Stack the Machine Man, who anybody who's read Next Wave knows just how hilarious that incarnation can be. But yeah, Kirby did a whole bunch of stuff returning to Marvel, and none of it was ostensibly set in the Marvel Universe. 2001 was just a adaptation and continuation of the Stanley Kubrick movie. Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur was just him having more Kamandi type prehistoric fun. And Eternals was him playing with space gods like he had done with the Fourth World. But, aside from being appealing to the Marvel diehards, this was kind of more of the same. Now, granted, I've read a little bit of Devil Dinosaur and enjoy the concept. And I've never read any Kamandi, so I don't know how much the various ideas overlap, other than being both prehistoric set storytelling pieces. I mean, from what I know of most of the 70s to 80s era comic book artists and beyond, give them an excuse to draw dinosaurs and they'll run wild with it. Don't give them an excuse to draw dinosaurs and they'll find one.
Yeah, I'm just imagining the bird guy, like the dinosaur bird guy from X-Men.
Sauron. Actually, Sauron's a bit of a different story. There's evidence to support him being an early attempt at doing a vampire character when they weren't allowed to do vampires.
When you around the comic code.
What is his powers like vampire? Like
he sort of drains energy.
Oh yeah, he evokes all of the standard tropes of a vampire without looking to the casual observer like a vampire. I mean, he's got a monstrous demonic form with giant wings, but he's a dinosaur, not a bat. He's got the straight up hypnotic powers, but instead of mesmerism like the vampire where it's on a subtle level, see What We Do in the Shadows, it's more of like a mesmerist where like
you stare into his eyes and he kind
of to hypnotize you rather than just suggestive. No, he's like, look into my eyes, and then he directly feeds off of the life force of the living. And when he feeds off of a mutant, that's when he becomes Sauron, the big demon dinosaur genetic abomination, whatever the hell he's supposed to be. But he's not a vampire. If he's a vampire, the comics code says no, so he's not a vampire.
Yeah, because I only know him from the animated series, so I think he's just the dinosaur form.
No. When you first meet him in the cartoon, he was human, and when he drained one of the other guy's energies, he turned into Sauron, and he does hypnotize people and kind of control them a little bit. That'll happen.
That's the thing that works about the characters, because he's so diluted from what his source material would have been. Like compare Sauron in the cartoon to Morbius in the Spider-Man cartoon, and Morbius's constant plasma. I must have plasma. As opposed to his actual, biting people and sucking blood from them.
Yeah, because they had to change that for the show.
They're trying to censor that character and make him more appealing to not necessarily the kids watching, because we're not idiots and we know what a vampire is. Freaking standards and practices. But Sauron, having already been tailor-made to get around those sort of censorship conventions, they don't have to change him to fit him into the cartoon. The things he does are abstract enough to get around the censors. So there, he works. But we've gotten on a few tangents here because of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs in comics will always do that to you. Back to Jack Kirby where we were. That was just his explosion into the Marvel universe, and by trying to segue those books into the mainstream continuity, it's muddled things a bit, and that's always been a flaw in Eternals, is it's shoehorned into the mainstream Marvel universe when it was never intended to be part of that.
It's always fun when they do that.
Just to bring things back to where we got off into this tangent. But I do believe the subject heading was Moon Knight.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to get up to that.
That's why I figured we'd get there eventually. So what
do you know?
As I said, I know his name is Moon Knight.
I know I
Alright.
like the idea of Oscar Isaacs playing the character. I
Yes.
think he's got the acting chops to be able to play somebody as complex as
Yeah, because
Moon Knight, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley.
So I think
there's
we
a
really
couple
got
of
to
others
get
buried there
into.
too.
I think we got to get into the basis so we can explain to
Yeah.
Adam about the character, right?
Yeah, because
So-
I know
Yeah.
because generally he's like has some
Wait,
sort of
I'm-
like
I'm waiting
mental
to hear
issues
it.
or something.
Okay,
There's a
so-
particular tagline for describing Moon Knight that I haven't heard yet, and I'm kind of surprised.
Oh yeah, so I know. Like, okay, yeah, so yeah, like I mean, he's like Marvel's Batman. That's what I guess was what you're.
Pretty much.
Pretty
much.
Yeah, so yeah,
That's
so
a bingo.
that was
So-
what. That was great. That was probably going to come eventually to see how close that actually is or not. Because
Well,
Actually, I
we'll get to the
don't
It's
point where we'll
not
explain
an
how it goes.
unfound
Yeah.
comparison. We'll start
So-
off with that.
The story goes that this guy named Mark Spector, who was this soldier who worked for the this bad guy named the Bushman, wasn't it?
At the time,
time, yeah.
where his origin story picks up, yeah, he's working under Raoul Bushman.
He ends up getting betrayed by them and dies, and is brought to this temple of an Egyptian god named Khonshu, who resurrects him but makes him his sort of servant, as his Moon Knight.
It should be pointed out that it's not just that he ends up there. Like certain followers seem to.
Yeah, he's
have
brought there. Yes.
brought-
and is this like brought up in his first ongoing or in
His very
or-
first-
it's
or it's his first
not that
appearance
simple
or
with
in
Moon
World?
Knight.
Yeah,
It's
it's
very convoluted origin.
when he starts getting his own regular story, they explain the origin. But when he
Okay.
first shows up, he's just introduced as Moon Knight in an issue of Werewolf by Night back
let's
in
just
75.
let's
Yeah,
start it
number
with that. So
number 32.
Yeah.
32 is right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just start it there. So Moon Knight, in his original conception, was just a throwaway villain, not a villain actually, but an antagonist for Jack Russell, Werewolf by Night, to cross paths with, a specialized mercenary to be able to take the werewolf down several pegs.
So kind of like a Hulk Wolverine deal, kind of.
Not, I wouldn't say quite that. Like Wolverine was just kind of this snappy little like, hey, here's this new character we're just gonna throw in here. What do you think, kids? No, the storyline for Werewolf by Night at that point, it's been a while since I've read the specific story, but I do have it in issues. But Jack is hanging out with a number of people that are close to him. A guy who's like an uncle / brother to him. Another woman he's gotten close with. This woman has a little child who, if I'm not mistaken, was like named Buttons or something.
Yeah, it was something silly like that.
But circumstances conspire to have this uncle brother figure in the woods with Jack and Buttons on the night of the full moon, and he gives his all to make sure that despite losing himself to the werewolf, Jack is not able to do any harm to this poor little girl Buttons. Little girl's left a little traumatized because she saw Wolfman friggin' gut a very protective father figure to her. So yeah,
As it does.
the werewolf did bad, and the werewolf needed to be done bad. So the next story arc, with reeling right off of this character having been mauled by the werewolf, we go into this silver-clad Moon Knight Avenger just fucking the shit out of our werewolf. Like the werewolf's already dealing with a broken paw because he's a stupid, emotional creature that just lashes out at whatever, and it's in its haste has wounded itself. And now, no matter what it does to fight off the Moon Knight, it's coming into contact with Silver, which fucking hurts, and its right paw, which he's right-handed, so every time he lashes out, it's with that, and that fucking hurts. So he just keeps getting smacked down because this Moon Knight guy is skilled. He's got the fighting skills to be able to take on a werewolf. And though he's not expecting an honest to God werewolf, it's not phasing him. And he's giving it his all. And kind of getting annoyed when the werewolf just keeps getting back up.
Like just stay down,
done
werewolf.
things-
Like, come on.
Yeah, he's his mistake is he's rationalizing the fight as if he's dealing with a man in the form of a beast, not a beast in the form of a man.
Yeah.
So on an instinctual level, the werewolf can't just submit to this Moon Knight guy because everything about him is just wrong to a werewolf. You know, he's taken this symbol of the moon, which normally gives a werewolf its strength, and has, in the werewolf's eyes, perverted it and made it something that just shouldn't be. Like, it's just wrong. But the convoluted aspect of Moon Knight becomes very apparent when you take a character like this from what should be just a, hey, here I am to kick this character's ass. That's all I'm good for. Bye-bye. Oh no, the readers love you. We need to do more with you. Because one of the confusing aspects of Moon Knight is that he's brought into the conflict by the antagonists of the werewolf. There's this committee that, typical comic book shenanigans, they've got some nebulous plans for, if not America domination, world domination. And it involves the werewolf somehow. It's important to their plans, but it doesn't ever really make sense. But Moon Knight is their agent for taking out the werewolf. As far as the committee is concerned, they've set up this ex-CIA, ex-US Marine Black Ops mercenary with this flamboyant superhero identity, and the guy's just gone off the rails and kind of taken it for himself, and this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the committee. And from a reader perspective, when you read Moon Knight, like, okay, the committee gives him this costume, they give him this equipment, send him off on this mission, and he's just going to keep this outfit and he's going to roll with this identity of Moon Knight and it's just going to be his. There's a bit of filler in between the werewolf first appearance and when he finally gets his own ongoing series. By the time we get to that ongoing series, we do need to address what exactly is going on with this origin story. Is Moon Knight Mark Spector, Jake Lockley, Stephen Grant, this composite individual, or is he just a job for hire created by the committee? Something's not adding up here. Dan, you've been reading. Do you want to sound in?
Well, from what I was reading further on, they tried to, the first time they explained it was basically him excusing that they just gave him silver weapons to fight the werewolf. But other than that, they kind of go ahead and they more or less sort of ignore it when they get into the whole Khonshu origin and all that.
Well, not being a huge fan of Moon Knight myself. I mean, I think I've mentioned before how I've never really been a big superhero guy. Most of what's drawn my attention into the Marvel universe has been how expansive their horror side of things has been. But being a tangential character to Marvel's horror pantheon, Moon Knight's kind of popped up here and there. So when I came across the old Essential Volume 1 of it for a good price at a con, I can't pass up on that. It'll fill my education a little, give me fill some gaps in my knowledge.
Yeah.
But reading through that one, the way they eventually course correct with the Moon Knight identity is that part of who Moon Knight isn't just the singular physical identity of our titular character. That may sound like a really weird way to describe things, but when you consider that Moon Knight is a composite of at least 4 or more identities. You've got the costumed Avenger Moon Knight. You've got the streetwise cabbie Jake Lockley. You've got the millionaire playboy, suave, sophisticated Stephen Grant, who ironically does share a name with comic book writer Stephen Grant, who, if I recall correctly, has written Moon Knight.
Yes, he has.
That's funny.
And you've got his original birth identity of Mark Spector.
And which ones are in the trailer for Moon Knight? Do you remember?
They definitely mention
Remains to be
Steven.
seen. They do mention the
do see him
indications are
driving a cab.
that there's
Sorry?
distinction between a couple of characters at
Okay.
least. But
Yeah.
the
Someone
full
on the phone-
ramification of it may be more to be seen, because some comics at other points in his career or the character's history have indicated that there's a lot more levels to what's going on with Mark Spector's psyche, and that there may be a few more personalities that aren't often touched upon.
In the trailer
So-
specifically, we do keep hearing that they keep referring to him as Steven, but then when they hear him on the phone, someone calls him Mark. And I
Okay,
do
yeah.
believe we also do see him driving a cab at some point. So that would assume that the Jake Lockley identity probably shows up as well. But again, this is just
I wouldn't
guessing.
expect those three, but it's Moon Knight. They could really play with a couple of preconceived notions that viewers may have.
Mhm.
So the three civilian identities are a safe bet, but I'm not betting money on them, just because we've seen how they like to kind of play with things. Like it almost seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a chance to do the Ultimate Universe correctly. You know, where they
Well, that's
they
part of the
get
reasons why we
to
probably are
start
getting all three of
over
those
from the
identities, though.
beginning, number one.
But
Yeah,
that's probably because I mean, one of the things about Marvel stuff is they always having their ideas behind everything, you know. So one of the
True.
ideas behind this one is going to be with the multiple personality disorder, that they're really going to play up the
True.
ideas with that and do that story with it. So that would say that there is going to be the multiple ones. I mean, again,
There-
we can
there is
confirm
that,
Mark
but
and
one of
Steven are
the-
in it. We can
one of
confirm
the
that.
problems though is historically every time they've tried to pin down a psychological analysis on what's going on with this character's fractured psyche, it never matches up with textbook diagnoses.
Yeah, but
of
that was the way it was
real-world
with everything
things.
back in the day, not just in comic
True,
books. I mean, all sorts of
true.
stuff. And
There's-
nowadays we have people that actually try a lot harder with that kind of stuff, you know.
True,
I mean,
true.
look at most of Moon Knight's history. They kept calling him schizophrenic, which we know
Yeah,
is not even close
exactly
to
what I'm getting at here is that they've often conflated certain diagnoses with other things like dissociative identity disorder with schizophrenia, and that's always been seen as a mistake. I do believe it was Warren Ellis who finally corrected things to say, like, it's got nothing to do with any of that. No, the entity of Khonshu made a psychic connection to a young Mark Spector, and that's kind of screwed up his brain on a fundamental level. Having a psychic connection to an otherworldly god isn't gonna do your mental health any favors.
Might screw you up just a little bit.
So yeah, so we can thank Warren Ellis for being a more outside the box thinking kind of comic book writer once again in his endless career as a fantastic writer. And he's been able to take things away from what you might find in a university textbook and put it back squarely into the realm of, like, no, this is comic books. Some elements of comic books do need to be reflected opposite of what's happening in reality. You know, we need representation. We do need to be able to find yourself in the stories you're reading.
Yeah.
But at the same point, these are comic books. This is a fantasy realm. You can just be here for fun. You don't need to get all angsty and
Yeah, but to be fair, if they were going to do it
gloomy.
for fun, they wouldn't be doing Moon Knight.
Yeah, you
Just
say
saying.
that without having read some of the really earliest stuff where it
No,
doesn't really seem to know if they give a shit or not.
I've read enough to know that yeah, no, if they really wanted to go fun, they probably wouldn't do Moon Knight. You know, they'd probably
Yeah,
go Devil
but-
Dinosaur, right?
but then they wouldn't necessarily have Marvel 2-in-1 issues.
I don't really know if those count in general when you're talking about anything Marvel outside of that, right?
How many times have I mentioned Project Pegasus?
I know.
Project Pegasus is an absolute classic.
What's a Project Pegasus again?
Project Pegasus is one of the earliest multi-part stories that Marvel did back in the 70s. 2-in-1 being the Thing's ongoing title, where he would just roll from one adventure to another and hang out with, team up with, meet, get into a fist fight with some new or old friend, enemy, frenemy, who knows. It was a mixed bag. You know, you look at the cover and you see Marvel 2-in-1 presents the Thing with Freak of the Week. If it's a Freak of the Week that you particularly like, awesome. If it's a Freak of the Week that you've never heard of, awesome. You know, just roll with it. It's the Thing. But they're typically very loose, not necessarily
Whatever random reason to throw the two of them
stories.
together for whatever
Yeah,
random sort of thing
yeah,
that kind of
like
solves itself very easily, you know.
This is the kind of series
Pedestrian.
that'll throw caution to the wind and just do whatever they want. But then a particular story arc, somewhere around issues 42 to 48, give or take. Mark Grunwald does a multi-part story that has Ben Grimm meeting this projected energies group, blah 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 blah. It's a government think tank of superheroes and super scientists trying to just come up with other ways to provide energy for the public.
Yeah.
So they've been not experimenting on, but studying different superpowered individuals that they've had in custody. One of these superpowered individuals is a character known as Wondar. He was introduced in an early issue of Man-Thing's Adventures into Fear. He's basically, Steve Gerber was jamming out to CCR and decided he would write a Superman pastiche based on CCR's song "It Came Out of the Sky." So imagine if Clark Kent's, or Kal-El, I'm sorry, imagine Kal-El's Kryptonian spaceship crash lands in the Florida swamps, and the lonely old couple that sees the crash are so freaked out about it, they just take off to tell the authorities, and nobody discovers the pod for like 25 years. And it just happens to get knocked loose by Man-Thing passing by. And this fully grown Superman with the mind of a toddler pops out, sees Man-Thing, and is like, "Hey, motherly imprint. I'm going to follow you around, mama." It doesn't go well. I've never read the story where Man-Thing first meets Wondar, but not Man-Thing, Ben Thing, Ben Grimm the Thing. I've never read the one where he first meets Wondar, but the way things are portrayed in Project Pegasus, and the way we've seen with Ben Grimm before, is that he always plays up this persona of being, you know, just as stony inside as he is outside, but the guy's got a friggin' heart of gold.
He's a big old softy.
He is. And
Very nice.
he early on in Man-Thing's history, Ben Grimm became one of the few people to recognize the truth of what the Man-Thing was, and that he had previously been the scientist Ted Sallis. But
Yeah, because he has basically the same story as Swamp Thing, right?
Basically.
Yeah, and Alan Moore's kind of played with that a little bit. We do notice the Man-Thing type creature in the Parliament of Trees in Saga of the Swamp Thing. Like there is definitely connections, but regardless, Ben knows this, and Ben, just being a cynical, broken-hearted piece of crap sometimes, really feels, and maybe justifiably so, that a sad sack case like Ted Sallis is beneath the notice of somebody like Reed Richards and the other scientists. So Ben's always had a soft spot for the people that fall between the cracks. So when he meets Wundar, recognizes Wundar for what he is, he, you know, Wundar nestles his way into Ben's soft little heart. And he considers himself to be like a surrogate uncle to this mental infant. So when he finds out that Project Pegasus is holding on to Wundar, he gets agitated and he crashes through their security to make sure that they're not doing him any harm, and finds out that no, Project Pegasus is actually on the level. They're not doing anything bad, even though this, you know, this Quasar do-gooder who's chief of security, even though he looks exactly like that Crusader type that was so much trouble, oh, everything here is good. But as the 6 issues progress, we find out that there's a traitor in Project Pegasus. There's one scientist who's been expressing that, oh no, he's happy that he's recovered and no longer a superpowered villain, but he's really using all the resources to just get himself powered back up. Things go a little bit out of control. Wundar evolves from being who he was to becoming the Aquarian, where if Superman had all of his power focused on his brain instead of his body.
Yeah.
So like he's still super strong and all that, but the Aquarian has like a level of just kind of bohemian understanding that puts him on a level beyond most other Marvel characters. Let's put it this way. How familiar are you with Marvel Zombies?
Not very at all.
Well, at a certain point, like when the series was introduced, it was made clear that this was one of the most virulent strains of zombieism we have ever seen in any version of fiction. The characters that should not be able to become zombies are getting zombified. It just doesn't make sense on a fundamental
So
level.
like a Wolverine sort of thing, or
Yep.
Ghost Rider,
oh damn,
a spirit of vengeance, gets infected with zombie virus. Like robotic characters seem to get turned into zombies. Like it seems to be like on a quantum level that this is happening. At a certain point in the Marvel Zombies run, the virus makes its way to the mainstream 616 universe.
yeah.
And this is during the era of the Initiative, when every single United State has its own superhero team. And with the nature of the nexus of realities in the 616 universe, that is where the virus first appears, is in the Man-Thing swamp. So Aquarian is one of the characters on the team that deals with this outbreak incursion of the zombie plague, where it really matters. Aquarian gets bit. When they've dealt with the situation and are settled, Aquarian confirms that, yeah, he can cure himself of this virus. He just has to, you know, take the time to focus and meditate. Like he has to put all his focus on himself. He can't be worried about what's going on with anybody else.
Yeah.
But he can cure himself of that virus. That's a level that's questionable. What other characters could accomplish that? Legion, maybe?
Oh yeah.
Legion probably could.
Like
It would be questionable whether or not X-Man would be able to cure himself of this particular zombie infection. Like that's how major this stuff is.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
like
fuck.
this Project Pegasus story it brought changes to multiple characters. It was the first like to be continued, where you had like a graphic novel by the time you were finished. a full graphic novel type story back in those days is rare.
Yeah, it didn't happen too often.
I understand Black Panther's story in Jungle Action was another early example of graphic novel that Marvel did serialize throughout multiple issues of a title. I may be having internet troubles here. We've had some funny internet over the last couple of days at my place. I've heard my roommate raging at things. Not his customers this time.
Yeah, you're kind of going there for a second, but you're fine. So no worries.
Yeah, it's been sketchy, but well, if I haven't cut out, then that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, Project Pegasus was a trailblazer for Marvel in terms of what could be done storytelling wise back in the 70s, and as far as what would retroactively be known as a long form graphic novel tale. Moon Knight actually gets a little bit close to some of that in certain regards.
How so?
Have you ever heard of any of, let me rephrase that. How familiar are you with Marvel's magazine output back in the day?
Also not very much.
It's a deep well to get into. Back in the 70s, Marvel was published through a company called Cadence Industries, and they were a magazine publisher. And Marvel used those avenues to be able to put more stuff out onto the magazine newsstand, the same way as we would eventually see heavy metal show up. Among the numerous magazines that you might not have heard of as just a regular Marvel fan, but the magazines, like, some of these stories really matter. The more of the horror stuff we get into, the more we can talk about the magazine stuff, because Comics Code didn't apply to the 8.5 by 11 magazine format. That's how Mad got away with things, and how Marvel realized that they could push certain boundaries. So, among other things, there was a Hulk magazine back in the 70s. There's been a few Hulk magazines in the day, but the specifically titled Hulk with an apostrophe, Hulk magazine, there was a backup serialization in that where Doug Moench and Bill Sienkeiwicz got to give Moon Knight legs to run. And because it was in the magazine, they had a little bit more creative freedom as far as what could be done with art. It's not what we would come to expect from Bill Sienkeiwicz later in his career. This is very early Sienkeiwicz. It straddles the line between the level of structural creativity that he would display in New Mutants. Can you think of a better way to describe it, Dan?
Well,
You've read enough of Moon Knight and Sienkiewicz's work on that, and I know you're damn well familiar with his work on New Mutants.
it's before he starts getting to his
There's
more.
a jump between the two, but you can see how the start of it, the sparks are there in Moon Knight.
I haven't read enough of the magazines to see fully, but the earlier stuff I read of the Sienkiewicz's
It's still very
Moon Knight,
superhero-y.
very structured, very superhero, a lot more standard Marvel type. It wasn't. He hadn't gone even close to the aspect that of just
It's not as
out there New
experimental.
Mutants was, yeah. But you could see there were some lead ups to it with him, how he actually would draw Moon Knight himself.
There's a striving for something more than what some of the art is providing.
Exactly.
As the Moon Knight monthly series progresses, his artwork does begin to stretch and to grow and to breathe, and start to play with certain conventions a lot more than what he would normally have been allowed.
Very nice.
Moon Knight had been an early breakthrough success for Marvel when they were toying with the direct market crowd.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones that was sold directly to comic stores, right?
Yeah,
really?
and I'm not sure of the details, but I believe it may have been part of a special push for the direct market as well. Like, having spent so much time buying monthly comics in the store, there are those times when you'll find a publisher does something extra to push a certain title. Let's see. The most infamous in mine and Daniel's time collecting, and you'll probably remember this one too, Adam. Do you remember mid 2000, early to mid 2000s, give or take? Marvel hyped a new Namor series drawn by Salvador Larroca.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, 25-cent first issue.
Oh fuck.
When that issue dropped, I got the first issue of it just because I like Namor, and I've been a fan of Salvador Larroca since he revolutionized the artwork on Ghost Rider back in the 90s.
I was pissed it took him off Extreme X-Men for that fucking book.
And then that's the segue into things, is that up until this point he'd been the X-Men artist, like the artist, and they decide they need him better on Namor.
He was the only.
Oh my God, it was a waste of
X-Men.
talent. It was a waste of talent. You couldn't find a colorist that can't think of another underwater color than blue? Everything is blue that isn't Namor's flesh or Speedos. And it's all so monotonous. And it's just a big wank off for Belgium ass too. I'm in charge of the company. I can call the shots. I can take our hottest artist off of our titles, put them onto my passion project, and just watch the sales skyrocket. You want to know how sales skyrocketed? After me and a couple of other people got our requisite issues, our friend Gord read it, was abhorred with the piece of crap that it was, and bought every remaining issue at Dixon's to save fellow readers from the travesty that was that piece of shit title.
Yeah.
I remember Dixon's.
Yeah, I miss Dixon's.
Yeah, so there are times when comic companies will do things to try to push a title, and they'll massively backfire. But it looks like Moon Knight may have been one of the ones where they may have given some sort of discount or incentive to retailers to pick up the orders on it. Because from what I understand, it was a hot title back in the day. I've got a friend who's about a decade older than me. He's a little bit old, like actually not a little bit, he's a good chunk older than you, Adam. He's an aged Toronto goth. But he's, in talking with him, like there's a few comic book titles that, despite his reading era being so disconnected from my reading era, like he's old 70s, like Conan era, ElfQuest. He's one of the guys that recommended ElfQuest to me, and ElfQuest was hyped so much throughout everything that I was exposed to throughout comics, like Wizard. There was so much exposure for ElfQuest in Wizard. Oh my God, ElfQuest lives up to the hype.
Yeah, it does.
ElfQuest exceeds the hype.
Yep.
But besides ElfQuest, Moon Knight is the only other title that this friend has actively spoke about. Like, hey, I might at some point be interested in rereading some of that early Moon Knight stuff. And like, coming from this friend, like I've made it clear to him, like, dude, with the amount of stuff you've introduced me to, if there's anything in my comic collection that you're interested in reading, any memory you want to revisit, any story you've heard about that you think like, that might be worth checking out, free reign. Besides Dan, he may be one of the only friends that has 100% access to what's in my collection. I would trust him that much.
Very nice.
And Moon Knight, again, one of the ones that he stands by is like, that was a good comic. So there is depth and substance to it, but it does seem to take a bit of time to grow. The first essential that I have here, the volume 1, for any listeners that may be interested, the Marvel Essentials were phone book sized trade paperbacks that collected noteworthy runs in black and white. So early ones that Dan and I got were a few volumes of X-Men, We got Brandon that volume of Wolverine when
I
they
think the Wolverine was one of the
first
first ones they
came
made.
out.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah,
Wolverine one was the
that
first
was
one they ever did.
way. We were kids when we gave him that one.
Yeah.
Damn. I still have a Howard the Duck. That's a really early print. Like it's some of the printing layouts in it are pathetic. Like there is a solid inch of gutter around the pages in the Howard the Duck essential that I have. Small price to pay because that one actually has the contents in order. Some of them would put a run of comics like Dan's X-Men ones would have like 20 issues of X-Men from the 70s and then have like one or two annuals at the end.
Oh, and then
after a while,
later printings, they would have them annuals where they were supposed to be within the stories.
yeah, because even in the ones that Daniel had, I think you had volumes 2 and 4
Yep.
of Uncanny back in the day.
Yep.
Even those ones that he had, the early printings, we could tell like, oh, these annuals should be set partway through these books.
Oh, fucking out of order.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the essentials were a growing project that would be revised after edition after edition. The Moon Knight one that I've got is got to be from the 2000s. So much in the Indica, 2006, and it does a pretty good job of putting everything in order. We got like Werewolf by Night 2 and 3, or sorry, not 2 and 3, the 32 and 33, the first two-parter, and then Marvel Spotlight 28 and 29 are first solo appearances. And then we get him showing up in various other projects. There's a couple of Spectacular Spider-Mans that he shows up in, followed by one of the aforementioned Marvel 2-in-1s. Following that, he's got about a 10-issue run, give or take, in Hulk magazine. Yeah, issues 11 to 20 with follow-up in Marvel Preview 21. If I recall correctly, that Marvel Preview, yeah, there we go. Marvel Preview Moon Knight. That specific story is one of the ones that really starts to expand on his background besides what we've been given up to that point of his various personalities, his support cast of Marlena, Frenchie, and Crawley. Marlena is his love interest. She is a woman who is involved with his origin story. We got Frenchie. At the point where Moon Knight is introduced, Frenchie doesn't have any further background than being an old wartime buddy of Moon Knight's. He's been on mercenary ops and other missions, and the two trust each other with their life. And Crawley is a local New York derelict who is used as a source of information for Moon Knight's information gathering. He's got an ear to the street and always seems to have some kind of information about whatever caper Moon Knight's trying to figure out. And there's expansion to the cast beyond that. But with the Marvel Preview issue, that's the first indication of what may have gone on in Mark Spector's life before his mercenary days. He's dealing with a serial killer known as the Hatchet Man, who has an MO that seems familiar to Moon Knight and Moon Knight alone. Even reading the story for the first time, it's no real spoiler to figure out that the Hatchet Man is related to Moon Knight. The tropes are pretty well played out.
Just like a person he knows, or like a family member.
Yeah, the way Mark keeps reacting to these reported exploits of the Hatchet Man, no, it's clear that there's a connection, and we find out that the Hatchet Man is Randall Spector, Mark's younger brother, who always came up short in their encounters. Like it's a very one-sided sibling relationship where whatever Randall aspires to, Mark has or will do better. And it's it feels a little bit forced just to it's like they worked backwards from the revelation that, oh my god, the killer is my younger brother and I knew all along. Like it's like that was the revelation they wanted for it, and then just built the story backwards to try to come up with this narrative for, oh, reveal, oh, shock. But it
I
is
get
the first indication that Mark Spector had a life prior to his days as a heartless mercenary.
yeah.
Things may matter to him beyond his current cast of characters. It's also nicely illustrated.
Very
I
nice.
mean, it's there seems to be a certain expectation set for the art style for the superhero endeavors in Marvel. Like,
especially back in those days.
Yeah, who drew it?
when I got the book sitting right in front of me. I just got to go back to. So yeah, this is actually the continuation of Sienkeiwicz. He jumps on with Hulk magazine issue 13, lucky 13 for him, and sticks on. From what I understand, he becomes the regular Moon Knight artist until issue 30 of his ongoing title, and he still stays as cover artist for the remainder of it. I don't think it lasts all that much longer. I don't think it lasts more than a year after he leaves the art chores. But I don't think there was anything in between this and anything between Moon Knight and New Mutants. Are you aware of anything, Dan?
Anything I can think of, I'm pretty sure came after New Mutants.
That's what I was thinking too.
And considering when Moon Knight was running, I think he did go to New Mutants next. I could be wrong. There could be something else in
There
between.
may be a handful of with the crowd that Sienkeiwicz was running with at the time, like the other artists that he was associated with. He most likely was contributing other artwork to various small projects outside of the bounds of Marvel.
Well, even that, he could still have done a occasional fill-in for something at Marvel at that
There
point.
is that too, yeah. But like I'm thinking like the kind of stuff that, like, just spitballing off the top of my head, the stuff you'd find like in Star Reach. Comparing to the other compatriots that you would find in those titles. Like there's probably other bits and pieces.
Looks like he did Fantastic Four between doing New Mutants and Moon Knight.
How many issues?
I don't know. Just I'm reading here just to check it up, and it just said he had a stint as the artist in Fantastic Four, and then he became the artist on New Mutants. Because remember, he didn't come on to New Mutants until like issue 18, right?
Yeah, no, it's among the few X-Men issues that I have. I mean, that Demon Bear saga is. Couldn't consider myself a true Marvel horror fan if I left an omission like that in my collection.
Yeah. And I still need to read that.
It looks like Fantastic Four, he did issue 219 and then issues 222 through 231.
Sorry, what issues? 219 and then
222 to 231.
222 to 231. Does that include the Nicholas Scratch issues? God, I feel like I might have a couple of those issues.
Only you can answer that one.
Yeah, no, because there's when it comes to like the horror stuff, yeah, if there's a particular story, I got issues 222 and 223.
No,
Was
you
that
got
part
two
of
of them at least. Yep, those are part of them.
So those two issues are both by Sienkeiwicz, huh?
According to what I just read here on Wikipedia, just looking at the quick bibliography for all of the issues that Sienkeiwicz has done.
Damn, that has totally slipped my mind. Like, thinking back to the artwork in those issues, yeah, I can totally see it. It for what you would expect from Fantastic Four, yeah, it stands out. But what you would expect for the story it's telling, it's perfectly suited. So it doesn't really, outside of being like, wow, this tells the story great, it doesn't really jump out at you the way like the New Mutant stuff did.
Yeah.
So it may just be part of the transition because he stretches his artistic muscles on Moon Knight. Like he gets to do some more experimental things. I used to have some of the more interesting art-wise issues that he had done, but I have a particular rule with my comic collection to keep it from getting excessively large, and that if there's a comic I've got that I'm not actually going to collect properly, like it's just taking up space and it's not like it's some specific storyline or specific group of issues that I have for a certain reason, I don't need to keep it. So I had a reasonable chunk of Moon Knight, and I came to the conclusion that, like, with everything else I collect, I don't really need to collect Moon Knight as a regular title. At which point I gave what single issues I had to my friend Victor, because Moon Knight was something that he was actively collecting. And I did give him a bunch of classic Sienkeiwicz issues at that point. And I can recall some of them had some pretty standout artwork where he was approaching the levels that you would see with New Mutants. Like, not quite at the point of designing characters such as Warlock, but oh so close, oh so crucially close. It is definitely the title where he began to show that he had something a little bit more than what the average up-and-comer had at the time. But of course, that's not to say that he's the only spectacular artist that has been on Moon Knight.
No, we've had David Finch. We've had all sorts of other guys over the years, right?
I was actually quite happy when in the early 2000s I began, well, actually around the mid 2000s, I began collecting Thunderbolts. And as we progressed through the Norman Osborn as director of the Thunderbolts era, there were a lot of fun things happening during that era.
And that's kind of like the Marvel like Suicide Squad, right?
Yep,
Or-
basically.
Basically,
or like closest comparison.
If there was gonna be, if they would do another Marvel versus DC crossover, yes, the comparable analog would be Thunderbolts versus Suicide Squad, but only in that both are typically teams of either incarcerated or wanting to reform supervillains. For the director Osborn era, for the most part, these guys were either imprisoned or coerced or being enticed to work for his, not necessarily his government yet. It wasn't until Secret Invasion that he got to take that next step. But one of the fun things happening during that era was Civil War. And one of the more outlandish things to happen during Civil War to any Marvel layman, like, it doesn't matter what corner of the Marvel universe you prefer, whether you're balls deep into everything from Avengers on out, or you're just picking and choosing the stuff you like from the characters you enjoy and the creative teams that give you pleasure. Everybody had to sit up and take notice when, wait, superheroes have to register their identities with the government. Moon Knight just registered and got a bona fide ID card? No. No, you can't convince me that that actually happened. But it did. Moon Knight, if I recall correctly, his rationalization was that, you know, as such a chaotic and unpredictable and anarchic character as himself, it's just so avant-garde for him to go and register. I mean, it's the last thing anybody would expect. The fun thing is despite becoming a card-carrying registered superhero, he didn't give a shit. He just kept doing his same ultra-violent torture the bad guys thing he'd been doing for a few years at that point. So you got to understand with Moon Knight is that if it hasn't been clear yet, his mental state varies.
Oh, very much so.
Oh, good God, does it vary? And not just the fun and carefree early days where Marlena only had to worry about which personality is she talking to now? Who is she saying hi to at this point? No, Moon Knight has varied in his devotion to what he believes Khonshu wants as a god, to how he feels about delivering his brand of justice to his kind of perpetrators. It's all over the map when it comes to Moon Knight. And he was pretty off the rails when it came time for the Civil War era. So after having registered, gotten his ID card, and given the proverbial middle finger to the Superhero Registration Act, Tony got a little bit annoyed. Mr. Stark felt things had to be dealt with. So, as one businessman to another, he had Norman sick the Thunderbolts on Moon Knight. Now, this is where I was mentioning earlier how I found I'm somehow missing the last part of the story arc. But yeah, it's fun. There had been a couple of debacles for this incarnation of the Thunderbolts along the way. They got bitch slapped horribly by American Eagle prior to this engagement. They got sent in to take out Ollie Osnick, the Steel Spider, or as Norman Osborn's medication deprived neuroses just forces him to say Spider-Man. No, Steel Spider. Man. Steel Spider-Man. Steel Spider-Man. 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 No, Steel Spider. Steel Spider-Man. And yeah, it just so happens that Ollie Osnick, if you're not familiar with, he's the kid who collected Spider-Man. There's an iconic early issue. Well, not early. I mean, well, given the time frame that we're dealing with in Marvel Comics, I guess it would be an earlier issue if it happened in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
70s, right, Dan?
Yeah, I believe it. It may have been early 80s, but I think it might have been 70s. It was more like the 70s.
But yeah, there's an issue where Peter finds out about this nerdy, bullied, downtrodden kid who utterly idolizes Spider-Man, like true fanboy. And Peter's feeling like shit at this point in his life because, well, there's always reason for Peter to feel like shit. Yeah. So he thinks he might get a little bit of an ego boost by having some fan adoration. And it doesn't go like super villainy or anything, but it's not quite what he expects. And it gives him a little bit of better perspective on what it means to be a hero. But the end result is this kid still idolizes Peter. And actually, wait a minute. I may be conflating this with a different story. Was this the same kid who made the Dr. Octopus arms?
I believe it was. Remember how Spider-Man had the Dr. Octopus arms?
Yeah, but I know that there was the kid who collected Spider-Man the same kid who made the octopus arms? I may be conflating the two. This is what I get for not being an actual diehard Spider-Man fan and just like picking and choosing, like, oh, this looks like fun.
Yeah,
no. Ollie made when Ollie first appeared, he made the arms.
Okay,
and
so
that was back in '82.
So then he wasn't the kid who collected Spider-Man.
Yeah, Ollie Osnick was an overweight.
So he was a
different Dr. Octopus.
Yeah, he was the opposite of the kid who collected Spider-Man. He was the one who idolized Oct. Yeah, but anyways, he got himself set straight, and well, as straight as a dysfunctional teen can be in the Marvel universe. I mean, we've seen how that plays out. But by the time of Civil War, he's in his early 20s. has lost all the baby fat and has refined his Dr. Octopus tentacles and is now the Steel Spider and is defending his podunk little small town that he lives in, which just happens to be the same small town that American Eagle lives in. I'm not too caught up on American Eagle. I know he has early appearances in Captain America, had some solo appearances in Marvel Comics Presents, which is a gold mine for just crazy off the wall fun stories. You got creators doing all kinds of wild stuff in there, artists getting to run wild with different styles. That's where Sam Keith gets to really play with developing his style. But yeah, American Eagle is basically a Native American Captain America, only he's got, as far as the Thunderbolt story goes, he's got significant super strength and super speed. As Ollie is making a laughingstock of the A team of Thunderbolts, which as a relatively average mid-20-year-old schlub with, for Marvel level tech, fairly low level mechanical arms, he's making a laughingstock of Thunderbolts. So they call the B team in. Would you be able to guess the single individual that makes up the B team for this incarnation of Thunderbolts?
I don't know.
Venom.
You're not
Venom.
familiar enough yet.
Yeah.
Venom.
Bullseye.
Oh, that's right. It was Bullseye in this one.
Venom was on the main A team. Bullseye was the B team.
I was mistaken
What-
that because Venom's the one who
what's-
takes out Ollie in the end.
Yeah, well, that's the one who takes out Ollie because he bites off his arm.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bullseye ends up getting sicked on American Eagle, and that's where the flaw in using Bullseye as a plan B comes into play. Bullseye's useless against true superhuman opponents. He can't actually hurt American Eagle, and it takes nothing for American Eagle to cripple Bullseye again. There's a bingo card for Bullseye being crippled.
Yeah, because he's the one that has like the adamantium like spine at some point or something like that or something.
Yeah, at some point it's
Yeah,
got an agent's fine.
actually, I've been rereading Alpha Flight, and that whole nonsense gets tied in there. And as I was talking with Dan earlier in the week, oh man, Lady Deathstrike is a stupid character in her initial appearances. not as Yukio.
Yeah, but when she turns into
No, sorry, not Yukio, Yuriko.
Yuriko.
Kind of annoying that there's Yukio in the Wolverine stories and Yuriko in Daredevil.
Oh yeah, that's right.
After the conclusion of her adventure with Daredevil, where she kills her father, Lord Darkwind, she suddenly has a 180 and decides, oh my God, I killed my father, and now I'm seeing all this unwavering loyalty he instilled in his soldiers. I need to learn more of my father's history. As if, being raised Japanese, she knows nothing of the Giri that Wolverine is so constantly going on about. As if she knows nothing about the level of honor that exists in her native society. Yeah. Yeah. She gets a little convoluted and kind of useless in her motivations. It's like by the time she starts showing up in X-Men, the writers have concluded, like, she's an idiot. She's programmed this way at this point. We don't have to care. She just hates Wolverine. Just let her loose. Is there any contrary to that, Daniel?
Not really. It takes a long time for them to really get in her beyond any time. But she shows up, she just tries to kill Wolverine. With the exception of the one time where he was basically dead. She's like, well, there's no honor killing him now.
Yeah, because that always happens in the comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was complex in the few. I don't have the full story arc of Daredevil where she first appears. I think I got about half of it. But she's definitely a hell of a lot more complex in that than she is in anything she appears in under her Deathstrike persona.
I'll have to see if I can find those Daredevil books in here.
Yeah, but yeah,
if I don't have them.
with Moon Knight, yeah, this with Bullseye, this is post the whole him getting fixed, and there's a lot of complications with Bullseye, and it gets confusing as to which point he's being crippled and which point he's not. I mean, there's some great stories back in the Frank Miller era where, ooh, dude, if we were still in a local location, there's some key issues of Daredevil that I'd have to show you. The Russian roulette issue where Daredevil is sitting at a paralyzed Bullseye's bedside, like hospital bedside, and recounting this whole situation he found himself in, involving like this little boy, his father who was involved in law but was corrupt, and the conflict in this little boy's mind over, he idolizes his father, but his father's a bad man who got taken out by Daredevil. And it culminates in the kid bringing a gun to school. And the narrative of the issue is Daredevil sitting at Bullseye's bedside with Bullseye paralyzed from like the top of his spine to the bottom, unable to say a word. As Daredevil like sits there, tells him this whole event as he puts the gun to his own head, pulls the trigger, tells more of the story, puts the gun to Bullseye's head, pulls the trigger, keeps telling the story, and as he's going, he just keeps taking the gun back and forth, playing Russian roulette, and at the final sixth bullet, pulls the trigger. And that's when he reveals the futility of their conflict between him and Bullseye, is that no matter what they do, their guns are empty. They'll just keep going around back and forth.
Until, Daredevil gets possessed by the beast and then, kills Bullseye.
Well, that's an entirely different fun story that Frank Miller really didn't have any idea was coming when he was writing those early stories.
We can get back to Moon Knight, because I gotta say, Moon Knight's thing in that is one of my favorite Moon Knight moments, right?
That was one of the ones like I got up to like, oh yeah, he was involved with that. I got to double check. Oh fuck, I don't have the time.
So Adam, the story of Moon Knight,
Shadowland was awesome. We'll have to cover that as an entirety at one point.
In the story, though, all the heroes are trying to deal with, like Daredevil going bad, and while they're all trying to deal with this, Moon Knight's already snuck into the prison, and he's already broken out, and he's already doing his own thing without involving any of the other superheroes, because that's just how Moon Knight does his shit.
He is not a team player. Like,
even though he has been an Avenger twice.
He was a West Coast Avenger for like 20 issues back in the day.
Yep. Until John Byrne took over and didn't want to use him, and then later he became a Secret Avenger, which is where the Moon Knight in the suit comes from.
No, apparently Warren Ellis introduced that a little bit earlier, and everybody else just liked it enough that they wanted to keep doing it. Because
Warren Ellis was the one who did the Secret Avengers.
I know, but he had done some Moon Knight stories prior to that, and that's where he introduced that whole white suit with just the simple mask. That's where it first came up. And then later with Secret Avengers, they were just like, let's just keep this ball going, man. This is awesome. Yeah. I mean, a good costume design is a good costume design.
Where did Warren Ellis work on it?
I was reading it earlier.
Because the earliest I know that he involved in it, like
5 or
he did volume 7, but that was after Secret Avengers. That was 2014.
No, he had done some earlier than that.
Well, there wasn't really any volumes
Vengeance of Moon Knight. Okay, so 2009 series that followed up the Thunderbolts era that I had got a few issues of. That's the one where it looks like that's where it was.
No.
No, okay, no. They're never mind. They're mixing the two. They're lumping the two bits together into one.
Yeah, no. Secret Avengers is where it was introduced, because that's where Warren Ellis first started writing Moon Knight.
But regardless, Warren Ellis is still one of the. If you're a listener who's unsure about where to branch out into the wider world of what comics can offer, I don't think it's possible to go wrong with Warren Ellis as the writer. I don't think it matters what direction you go in. If you find a book written by Warren Ellis, read it. Read it and enjoy. I can't think of a Warren Ellis story that I've read that I did not find some enjoyment from.
Astonishing X-Men.
That's a little bit of a different beast, though, Dan. I mean,
It was just not really. He took over after Joss Whedon, and it wasn't that he took over
exactly,
after, but that wasn't the problem.
exactly.
That wasn't the problem. That was not the problem. The problem was the convoluted story of alternate universes and mutants from alternate universes and these ghost boxes, and them doing a segue and doing a separate miniseries just about these ghost boxes, and it wasn't that interesting.
Okay, I remember some of that, and I'll concede.
Yeah,
I remember seeing the solicitations for Astonishing X-Men Ghost boxes, and I'm like, is this necessary?
I think you read a little bit of it up until the point where
I
Forge went
read
evil.
some of it, yeah.
No, you read up until Forge went evil. Forge was the bad guy in it.
Oh,
and you got to that
yeah.
point.
No, that's exactly the sort of thing that's going to turn me off from a story arc. Is taking a character that I genuinely like and respect and deciding, no, they're evil.
Yeah, no, that was when you were
there,
done.
There are certain times when it can be justified. I mean, I think I've mentioned before how I threw down the Jason Aaron issue of Ghost Rider that
No, Daniel Way. It's Daniel Way.
No. Remember, I had gotten through all the garbage that was Daniel Way's run of Ghost Rider, made it to Jason Aaron's run. Thought, okay, let's see if things get better from here. And then, like 2 or 3 issues in, it reveals Danny Ketch is the villain of this arc. I'm like, no, I can't take this. And I threw the comic down in disgust. Like, I can't suffer through all the garbage that was Daniel Way's run, and then now have this next run reveal that the character that I've been pining for this whole time is now the villain of this next story arc. No, I can't take it. A couple years later, though, thankfully, our friend Victor, we were hanging out. We had picked up our new comics, and he had been getting Deadpool Team Up. And the latest issue of that had Ghost Riders, as in plural. And I'm like, wait, what's this? Ghost Riders? Like, oh yeah, Johnny and Danny. What? Oh yeah, as of the end of the last Ghost Riders series, both Johnny and Danny both are Ghost Riders. I'm like, that's what I've always wanted. And I read the comic, and it's a fun little throwback to the sort of storytelling you would get from the old Marvel 2-in-1 with the Thing. Only now it's Deadpool teaming up with others. It sucks me in. I go out and I grab that issue, and I stick with Deadpool Team Up pretty much to the end because they had some fun characters showing up in that series. But it led me to work my way backwards through, beg your pardon, through the Jason Aaron run. And when I finally sat down and read Disgust, I understood where they were coming from a writer's perspective. I'm a huge fan of the 90s Ghost Rider. Danny Ketch is one of my favorite characters, but as portrayed throughout his series, Danny is stupid. Danny Ketch may be one of the dumber titular protagonists of a Marvel comic. The number of times Caretaker proverbially smacked him upside the head with answers to questions he was directly asking. What's this whole connection between me and Ghost Rider? There's no you and him. He is you. You're screwed up in the head. Get over it. You know, Danny was dumb. And going through this Jason Aaron run retroactively and seeing, oh, yeah, Danny's being manipulated by a heavenly bad guy and a bad guy angel. Oh my God, this is so in character for who Danny is. He would totally fall hook, line, and sinker for this crap. I did you wrong, Jason Aaron. I apologize. I did you wrong.
Then around this point, I'm also reading Wolverine and the X-Men, which is one of the most fun X-Men titles in the while, you know.
Oh,
That was just fun
Marvel
adventures.
teased us with some good Wolverine at that time.
Yeah, they did.
Juan Jose Rip. They got Juan Jose Rip for Ghost Rider.
Been censored his
Or
work
not
after
Ghost
one
Rider, sorry,
issue.
Wolverine. Yeah, one issue. I mean, good God. Juan Jose Rip is not an artist you want to see play in Marvel Sandbox. You want to see him somewhere where he could let loose, like Avatar, where you can see him illustrate Frank Miller's RoboCop, adapting his script for RoboCop 2 that was considered unfilmable, or Brian Pulido's Nightmare on Elm Street issues, which are classic 80s Freddy shenanigans. Or you could read Black Summer and No Hero, two phenomenal superhero postmodern works by Warren Ellis. You know, anything Marvel could let him do that would be outside of their Max imprint or epic as it was back in the 80s is a waste of the man's talents.
You say that, but to be fair, I think if he was the guy who did Hearts of Darkness, not to say there's any problem with the art in Hearts of Darkness, I think it would have looked fucking fantastic.
Can we clarify which Hearts of Darkness?
The Punisher, Ghost Rider, Wolverine one.
Well, yeah, but
Either or, to be
I'm
honest.
not sure if he was even in the comics industry
he
when
wasn't.
that came
He
out.
wasn't. I'm just pointing out that there are these occasional Marvel stories.
Yeah.
Work
No,
for, like, remember how I had that
would
one?
play to his strengths. True.
I remember how I
There's
had
lots
that. I
you
had
can
that one
find
issue
for
of X-Men Unlimited, where like the portal opened up and all the different X-Men from all the different universes were just pouring out and pouring out and pouring out. He would have done fantastic on that issue too, but I mean, I wouldn't want to take away Carr Andrews from that art because, well, Carr Andrews is amazing himself.
Carr Andrews is also an amazing artist too. He's not like Juan Jose Rip is like Jeff Darrow minus the engineering degree.
Yeah.
It's there's just a level of intricacy and detail that is rare in comics. But cutting back to trying to circle things back to Moon Knight, one of the artists that I personally enjoyed because he was showing a bit of resurgence around the time was those Thunderbolts issues that I had were illustrated by Mark Texiera.
I thought it was Diodato.
No, Diodato was the illustrator of Thunderbolts itself. Texiera was the illustrator of the issues of Moon Knight at that point.
I see what you mean.
But you'll recall that right after this arc, there was that huge marketing blitz for, I think, issue 25. And that was Diodato doing the Moon Knight issue, which was like the... I'm not sure how many fights Moon Knight and the Werewolf by Night have had over the decades, but this was like one of the major rematches. And Diodato was definitely the artist of choice for that one.
It's kind of like the whole, Rogue Miss Marvel thing. They don't need to be fighting anymore, but every once in a while, writers just want to throw them back into a fight again for no real good reason.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the reason for their fighting in that issue 25 or whatever was outside interference. The usual bad guy manipulation. It may have even been like the committee coming back. I think it's buried in my horror stuff somewhere.
Anyway, though, we've been going here for about an hour and a half now.
Oh yeah. We've lost track of Moon Knight several times throughout the discussion, but that's probably a consequence of having not really followed a whole lot of Moon Knight over the years.
Looking at the Moon Knight stuff is a problem. Is there's a lot of gaps and stuff. He late 80s and like most of the 90s, he wasn't really around. He didn't really come back again until around the Civil War era, and then even then he'd have a series and he'd be gone for a little bit, then he'd be back and gone. And
well, no, you're missing out. Mark Spector Moon Knight ran from 1989, give or take, for about
94
issues.
Yeah,
94.
Guess
So that's
you're
a
right
good
about
5
that.
years there. 98, there was that 4 issues with Doug Moench and Tommy
but again,
Edwards.
that doesn't really
I
count.
had a
so
couple
much.
issues of that one.
But at that point, I don't really count a lot of this main running stuff because remember, in 98 and 99, around that era of Marvel, they were throwing out miniseries of literally everything that it would be out just to get out and then would be forgotten about because half of them were crap. More than half of them were crap.
You're talking to the guy that sought out the last 2 issues of Journey into Mystery because Hannibal King was the headliner. Yes, they threw everything they could at the wall to see what would stick and make money. As if Hannibal King was going to be a moneymaker at any time. I enjoy the issues, but let's be honest.
He was never
not a character that's going to draw the readers' wallets. But yeah, no, following on, like 98, there's the 4 issues. 99 is when we get Moench coming back, this time with Mark Texiera as the artist.
But then how many of the series ended up with him dying and then being resurrected in the next series?
it becomes a plot point in later series about whether or not he has died.
Yeah, but that's again, when a series ends, he suddenly disappears and he isn't used again until they bring him back for a series. Then generally when the series is done, they stop using him again.
At least he's come back. I mean, Eric Masterson has stayed dead since the end of his series. I'm glad. Did they bring him
not
back?
quite.
They brought him back. They
There's
didn't need to bring him back. They gave his son the Thunderstrike mace.
So, what issue was I reading like the other week where there was something about a dead character coming back and they went to go see who it was. They were convinced it was going to be
No.
this one person, and then like a zombie Thunderstrike stepped out.
No,
What one was it though?
that's insulting. I
It was something I read the other week that like it was a recent issue that just came out.
Thunderstrike's one of those books where like I don't want to spoil and read the remaining issues online. I want to actually get the last half of that series and read it because I actually enjoy everything I've read of Thunderstrike. And from what I understand, like the guy sacrifices himself as like a true hero. Like he saves the world and it costs him his life. And you know, the way Tom DeFalco followed that up years later with Thunderstrike's son, Eric Masterson's son, Kevin. Like once he's a teenager, like he's kind of fucked up by knowing that his father was this great hero that saved the world. And what did it come to? He's never seen another superhero. None of the superheroes ever came in and said, "Hey, your father, your father was a great man." This kid has grown up with the hypocrisy of superheroes. And then he gets his father's actual Thunderstrike mace, and he's the only one that can use its power. And now he's realizing what it really means to be a superhero, what that responsibility is. Yes, this is like a Spider-Man for the modern age. We don't need his father brought back.
Well, I don't think they're bringing him back.
They
It was
better
this
not.
zombie one.
Like the number of times that Marvel has faked out on bringing back characters that should be brought back, only to give us characters that should have been left in the grave respectfully.
I am racking my brain on what it was that I read.
You'll just go onto your sources and read whatever you can do.
Yeah, especially when I'm working, there's nothing going on.
Mister, I work a job where shit never happens.
No, that's not true.
I
Shit
know.
happens.
I
Okay.
know. I've heard the stories.
And
It was the new Strange series, the first issue of the new Strange series. Clea is going back because she sees some resurrection. She's cast spells so that if some sort of resurrection energy is happening, she will know because she's convinced that Stephen is coming back to life. At the end of the issue, she starts detecting this resurrection energy and she goes to it and she's all happy that Stephen's going to step out, and instead a zombie Thunderstrike steps out. That was where it happened.
I gotta get the new Strange, but I'm disheartened a little bit.
Why?
I mean, I've been swerved before.
Yeah.
But
I'll wait
yeah,
and
no,
see until
I
she
just
comes out.
I just feel like that's an unnecessary resurrection when, like, one of the main comparisons between Marvel and DC is the willingness to rely on legacy characters. DC has typically shown a little bit more willingness to put an older character on the shelf in favor of having a newer character take up that mantle and trying to embrace that new character as that character. Like throughout mine and Dan's childhoods, Tim Drake was Robin.
Mhm.
We understood that Dick Grayson was the previous Robin.
well, the
We
first
got
one.
confused when people told us about Jason Todd
Yeah,
until we got older and read more comics.
yeah, so Tim would have been the third one. Yeah.
Tim was the third one, yeah.
Or on the other hand, Wally West. Our entire lives,
Yeah, it
Flash was
was.
Wally West, and
Yeah,
then
'cause-
until 2006 when they brought back Barry.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Barry died in it was 85 during Crisis.
Yeah,
right?
during
the
the
year I
crisis,
was
yeah.
born. Yeah, the
Yeah.
year I was born.
Yeah,
Fuck.
like that's something that gets overlooked by certain creative types in the industry, is that unless you're talking like real creator owned comics, no change is permanent. I mean, you can have some revolutionary new idea of how to interpret a character that you loved for ages that may make perfect 100% sense to you based on everything that you've read growing up. But who's to say that somebody 10 years down the line is going to have a completely different perspective on that character because they grew up in a different era reading different stories that were their introduction to how this character should be.
Grant Morrison tried to turn Magneto back into a crazy psycho bastard who just wanted to kill people because
like
that's
that
what he read
worked.
when he was younger. Not the character that had been developed over the years who had become more of a sympathetic character who, with all the everything with the Holocaust involving him, all that stuff. No, Grant didn't care about any of that stuff. Grant wanted to go back to being a crazy bastard that, in his words, everybody loved.
See, that's one that always bugged me, is that when you take a singular character that has had growth and development and then just set the clock back 10, 20, 30 years.
Or in this case, 40.
Yeah. Or as opposed to something like, say, my experiences as a Ghost Rider fan, whereas Johnny was the first Spirit of Vengeance type Flaming Skull Ghost Rider as a legacy character inspired by the previous Phantom Rider who had been Ghost Rider. Just a title thing, no character connection. Johnny had a full story arc throughout the 70s to 80s. He had a beginning, middle, and an end. And he's one of the few characters that got a happy ending for his time.
Yeah.
He got the girl. When we pick up later in the 90s with the new Ghost Rider, we find that Johnny married the girl, had kids, took over the Quentin Carnival, runs it as his business. He's got a life, he's got contentment, and that's all being thrown out of whack by this new Ghost Rider that may dredge up skeletons from his past. And then you've got like a decade worth of Ghost Rider stories with this new Danny Ketch. The old stuff is incorporated, expanded upon. We learn new things. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Danny and Johnny being brothers, I never had a problem with that. Never once. The explanations to rationalize it never felt too forced compared to some of the other shit that's gone on in Marvel Comics over the years.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
But then after the 90s series ends, it seems like every single other writer that wants to tell Ghost Rider stories ignores those 8 years, 1990 to 1998, those 8 years of dense storytelling in favor of dredging Johnny through more heaps of shit. And it's always bugged me as a fan. Like, I get wanting to tell exciting stories, but why do you have to arbitrarily change a character's status quo just to throw more shit at him? Like, I've talked with Daniel plenty of times about how the weirdness with Johnny Blaze is, are his kids missing or are they not? You follow the progression of his story. He rescues his kids. He saves them. That's how his ongoing series ends. But then the next reference we have to his kids is in the ongoing Ghost Rider series where, oh no, we've lost the kids. They're gone. I don't know where they are. Doesn't make sense. But it's just an example of trying to change the status quo to fit what you used to.
Oh, comic books.
Yeah. Moon Knight, thankfully, has seemingly avoided a lot of the steps backwards and generally just keeps moving forward, which does seem to give him a little bit of a different life than the average Marvel character, where it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's just constant shuffle all over the place. Moon Knight has his complications. They define him, and despite those definitions, he keeps moving and growing forward and doesn't really seem to backstep. I guess that makes him a pretty good character as far as consistency goes.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, I mean, you go into it kind of assuming somebody's got to be crazy to take a job to fight a werewolf. and they don't really do a whole lot to dissuade us from that initial assessment. Yeah, this is a guy crazy enough to take on a werewolf.
As you do.
Yep.
All right. So I think that it should get everybody at least ready for the show that comes out later this month. Any last things to add before we say goodbye?
Well, this is going to be should be more of a violent one compared to, closer to like what Daredevil was as opposed to what a lot of the other Marvel shows have been,
Right.
within reason on Disney Plus, because,
Yeah.
Moon Knight is supposed to be the more violent of the heroes.
Yeah. So
Disney Plus has been flirting with a bit of the more violent fare, and I do suspect that putting the Netflix Marvel stuff, at least on Canadian Disney Plus,
yeah.
is probably testing the boundaries of what
They announced
how
Disney
far they
Plus
can
is
push
getting it in the States as well, and they also announced the
Yeah,
States
I'm
is now
not
getting
surprised.
parental controls because of this. Because I guess
Yeah.
in the States they don't have any adult stuff, so there's no parental controls. Whereas here I've got like the kids blocked from all the Star stuff because, well, I mean, they don't really need to be watching Alien without me.
Dan, no, Lily's gonna watch Alien here.
Like I said, again, that's why you got to block her from it here.
There-
right?
there's lots of- There's gonna be movies I'll encourage her. No, like you want to watch a good ghost movie, The Frighteners? No, you have that on your shelf. You watch The Frighteners with mommy and daddy.
the
You'll be
Frighteners
better
is
off
great.
watching The
Classic.
Frighteners with mommy and daddy. But
Classic.
no, you watch Alien. It's gonna be at my place. She's gonna be sitting here between me and her dad. Yeah, but my thoughts on the Moon Knight TV show. I hope he fights a werewolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows
Hey,
up at one point.
Hey,
yeah.
they cast Werewolf by Night. We're gonna see him by Halloween.
They did. So it's not a pipe dream. I mean,
We can hope.
if you go on like YouTube or social media and all those places where you get inundated with all these clickbaity type articles, you will see all kinds of crap about these sort of, oh, can such and such character do this? Yeah.
All right.
I totally lost my train of thought somehow.
Clickbaity
I had
random,
one.
Can such character show up? Can this and this happen?
Oh yeah, the rampant speculation that you find all over the place. Mephisto? Is it Mephisto? It's Mephisto. See, it says here it's Mephisto. It's not Mephisto. But in this instance, it's not unjustified that we could see a werewolf.
Oh, there you go.
It won't
There you
break
go.
my heart, but I'll still have hope.
Okay, we'll have to come back and see, to find out if there was one or not.
Well,
All right.
we'll find out at the end of April, I guess.
All right. And then for the next episode, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what comes next after this.
Yeah.
Is it Doctor Strange? I believe it's
Doctor
Doctor Strange.
yeah, I
I
think,
think is
yeah.
the next thing.
Yeah, it's
That will
probably
be a lot to unpack.
yeah, that's May,
Like,
I believe. Yeah.
I think Doctor Strange, we're gonna have to do a pre-Doctor Strange 2
Yeah.
episode and a
Yeah.
post-Doctor Strange 2
yeah.
episode, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I-
We'll probably do like a Doctor Strange before it comes out. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, I
I
think with
already
some of the
got
stuff
the
I'm
Lego
hearing is going to
set.
happen in it, I think that after the movie comes out, we're going to have another episode about that to talk about things that happen in the movie that people need to know more about. Because I mean,
Alright.
we've already seen from the one trailer, somebody showing up that was unexpected.
Oh yes.
Yes. So,
Yes.
and
I'm
apparently
just
he's not
glad
the
that
only one.
Shumagorath is in it, and I'm disappointed that they can't call him Shumagorath.
Gorath, huh?
That weird
You
squid thing, with the
played
big eye.
Marvel. You played Marvel vs. Capcom. You played X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Come on.
Shumagorath
So-
wasn't an X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
So
No,
long-
I
so
I
long ago.
know that, but
He's
still
the weird
getting
squid guy with the big single eye.
yeah. X-Men
Okay.
vs. Capcom, the big alien tentacle thing, the Lovecraftian monster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
That's who we see in the trailer. They just can't call him Shumagorath because that is technically part of Conan. Yeah.
All right. So
All right. So
Well,
yeah.
anyway,
Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you too for discussing Moon Knight. And then join us, I guess, in whenever we do our next one. And until then, keep track of us on the Marvel Pod on Twitter or the Multiverse of Marvel on Instagram, and then we'll see when we're posting our next episode. And thanks for joining us. And until next time, read some comics, people.